If you're not currently offering airway treatment in your practice, you're likely missing one of the biggest clinical and financial opportunities in dentistry right now. If you heard Dr. Justin Warup on episode 58 of the Dental CEO podcast, you already know the opportunity that exists with Airway and why most dentists never fully implement it. And that's exactly why the Breathe method was created, to give dentists a clear, structured way to actually implement Airway into their practice. Over 2 days, this course walks you through exactly how to identify the right patients, build a diagnostic process, and integrate Airway into your practice in a way that actually works. It will also show you how to communicate with parents and market these services so patients move forward. Because if you can't present it, you can't produce it. You'll leave with a clear, repeatable system for diagnosing, treatment planning, communicating, and implementing Airway with confidence, so you can stop guessing and start executing. For a limited time, Dr. Warup is offering an exclusive discount to Dental CEO podcast listeners. Text Airway to 48659. That's AIRWAY to 48659 to claim your discount for his upcoming seminar in Fort Worth on September 18th and 19th.
So in a lot of these episodes on the Dental CEO podcast, we interview people. We interview dentists, we interview CEOs of companies, we interview business people. A lot of the things we talk about apply to an owner dentist or a mature dentist. Dentist that's already been successful and they're looking to kind of clean things up and organize things or maybe reach that next level. But it's time for something else. It's time to talk to the young dentist directly, thoughtfully. The young dentist, what should they think about today? What's some great advice? And while we're going to speak to the young dentists in this episode, the senior dentists may benefit from this as well, right? We may be further on in our careers, but maybe we have dropped the ball somewhere, forgotten something, or not thought of something. Or maybe we're not even a dentist yet. Maybe we're a dental student. It's important that we understand, I think, what great advice would be for the young dentist for that phase of the career and how we can live up to that advice as a dental student. How can we launch from that advice as an owner dentist? And when it comes to practice vision, to scheduling, to CE, to money, and even marketing, all of those topics have a place in the career journey of a young dentist. And we need to dive deep into those things. That's exactly what I'm going to do on today's episode of the Dental CEO podcast. I recorded it wasn't a video, it was a podcast episode, and posted something on Instagram about comparing the income levels and looking at the debt levels and really trying to answer the question, is it worth being a dentist in today's world? And that Instagram post went viral. Had, I don't know, maybe more than 1,000 comments. Very interesting to read those comments. And that led me to think, you know what? Let's talk to the young dentist. Let's get some great advice. And, or at least I hope it's great. I hope it's taken that way. But, had I to do it all over again, or if one of my children are going to become a dentist and they're now in that younger dentist phase of the career, what would I tell them, knowing what I know now? Having employed hundreds of dentists, having helped build more than 1,000 locations, and of course, owning in the past marketing company, IT company, and call centers and insurance centers, and doing startups. So I've just done a lot inside the world of dentistry, and including being a dentist. I feel like my advice comes from a lot of experiences. And here's what that advice might be. I think that as a young dentist, it's easy, unfortunately, to fall into the trap of mediocrity. Let me go kind of do what the average new dentist does. Let me do what the averages do. Let me achieve the average income. Let me achieve the average experience, the average clinical skill. And that becomes mediocre, and mediocre is good enough to live, and mediocre is good enough to find stability, and mediocre, that trap of mediocrity can last a decade. It's easy to just kind of fall into that. Just like follow the pack wherever the pack is pointed, right? And just kind of go do that, especially when dental professors, while we were in school are telling us to do that, to go work for a DSO and get your speed up and pay down some of your debt is like the typical advice. I don't know. I don't know if I really agree with that. So I'd like to kind of flip this around a bit, and I hope this is helpful. If I were talking to a young dentist, I would say, you know what? Let's get really specific for just a second. Let's go through an exercise. Very specific about money, about time, about dentistry, about the environment of our career. Maybe let's just stick to those four for a second. Let's be very specific. How much money, realistically, do we want to earn as a dentist? Let's define that. The average dentist is going to make about $200,000. If they're younger, they're going to make like closer to 150. If they're older, they're going to make closer to 240. But let's just say $200,000. Is that what we want? Do we want average? Do we want that kind of income level? Let's define what we actually want, because I think it's important, although it's kind of cliche, but it applies. It's important to know exactly where we're trying to go so that we don't put our head down and start swimming only to realize we've swam away from where we're trying to go. We need to define exactly where we're trying to go to give us the best and the fastest chance of getting close to it. So how much money do we want to make? Now, let's not be stupid about it. Let's not say, I want to make $3 million a year as a dentist. Okay, let's not be dumb about it. Let's be realistic. But I'd say what is realistic is, the national average, let's just call it 200 for easy conversation right now, to top performers. And let's just call that $1 million take home pay. 200 grand to $1 million take home pay. I think that is a realistic range of low to high. Although I know plenty of people that do more than that, but I bet we also know some people that do less than that. But 200 to $1 million is I think a realistic range. Well, what do you want to make? Let's just say 5 years from now. Where do you want to be? Let's define that. Write it down. Define that. And then let's add the variable of time. What I mean by time is really schedule. It's like my working schedule, my life schedule. What do I want my lifetime wealth to look like? I know my financial wealth, how much income I'm making, we're going to define with a number. But what does the time look like? And I don't want us to be dumb with this either. Don't say, I'm just going to work 1 day a week. We need to be realistic. And I challenge you, though, to not maybe name it in days per week work. Although you could say, well, I'd like to work, 5 years from now, I'd like to be at 4 days a week. You could say something like that. But I find it more valuable in managing life balance to not necessarily work less days, but to work less hours in every day. So I'd rather work, let's just say 10 to 2, right? 5 days a week than to work like 3 or 4 longer days a week. But because if we work a limited hours per day every day, we can create a cadence of activity every day, meaning I can wake up in the morning and I can work out, and then I can be with my kids. I can take them to school, and then I can get to work, and I can close my door, and I can focus on the business for half an hour or an hour. And then I can be a dentist for 4 hours. And then I could go pick up my kids from school, and then I can work out again if I need to. And then I can just chill and hang out with my family and be present. And that becomes a really easy day. That maybe is more healthy than I'm going to be overworked, overstressed some days of the week. And then I'm not going to have enough to do other days of the week, right? Like I'd rather not work 4 stressful days only to have to do nothing and recover for 3 days. I'd much rather work more than 4 days and make all of those days easy. But what I want you to think about right now is, well, what does that actually look like? From a goals perspective, from a vision perspective, what does my time allocation look like? And in that time allocation, I'm going to need to make the money I said I want to make. And if you actually are mature and responsible enough right now to do what I just said, to literally think about it for a minute and write it down, like if I would hope you're responsible enough to do just that, and you step back and ask yourself, what would my life look like if those two things happen? what would my life look like if, for example, I'm just going to make something up. I took home $500,000 or more per year, and I worked 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. 5 days a week. That's 5 hours a day, 25 hours a week. So that means I could be someone that is fit, that works out. I could be someone that's present with my kids. I could be someone that coaches soccer. I can have the energy to be present with my family or go on a date with my spouse. And I can have time to read a book or even work out twice. I have time for life, but I need to make $500,000 take home pay in 5 working clinical hours a day. Okay, what would my life look like if that was actually true? I think a lot of people would say, wow, that's actually a very healthy life, a healthy use of time to generate freedom of activity, to generate presence of relationships, and to generate, of course, money. So if we can start there with, okay, money and time, what is my schedule? What does my ideal money look like? And now I want to go deeper into, okay, well, what does my ideal dentistry then look like? If I want to achieve that schedule and money, what dentistry do I need to do that can help me achieve that and maybe also achieve happiness? Right? We want to do the kind of dentistry that makes us happy, but we also want to do the kind of dentistry that gives us the time and money life that we want. It's important to define that. So if we are being aggressive about our life happiness and saying, yeah, 5 hours a day, 500,000 take home a year, that means that we're probably going to be someone that says, okay, well, the kind of dentistry I need to be able to do to accomplish that result is some specialty dentistry. I need to learn how to do ortho, bracketed or not. Maybe I need to, be able to take out wisdom teeth, or I need to be able to place implants, or I want to focus heavily on cosmetic dentistry and facial aesthetics or sleep apnea therapy, but there's going to be types of dentistry that I can produce more in the same amount of time. And if I can work to become a master of those types of dentistry and get enough of those types of patients, then the result can be my 5-hour workday, my $500,000 a year take home pay a year. Right? And it's important to know this as a young dentist. I don't want to go waste away 5 to 10 years of my career in mediocrity taking a bonding agent class, wondering, how can I have more time for my growing family or more money for my goals? No, I want to define this. So what kind of dentistry is going to get me there? And then let's add one more thing besides my desired income, my desired schedule, and the dentistry that's going to enable that. What environment do I want to spend my career in? Because in the wrong environment, we get burnt out or unhappy, or we get almost disabled in success so that we can't achieve our goals. If we're in a practice type where patients don't want or need the kind of dentistry that we need to do, or we're in a practice environment where we're getting burnt out, or we're in a practice environment full of conflict and fighting, like all of those things can prevent us from achieving. We're in a practice environment where we got to work till 8 p.m. and it's just wearing us down. We're unable to have the focus and the energy to achieve. So it's important for us to define that as well. I wonder how many associate dentists, young dentists that go into an associateship have really sat down and written down, 5 years from now, I want to be making this kind of money in this kind of schedule and then this kind of environment. What kind of dentistry does it take to achieve that? I don't think many people think of that, but I think it's so important because now as you go look at your associateships, you're going to start judging them through these lenses. Is this an associateship that has an environment that is in alignment with where I'm trying to be? Does it have the kind of dentistry available, the kind of patients available that are in alignment with the dentistry I'm trying to master? Will it allow me to earn enough money to eventually have that future I want, right? These are the kinds of questions that we need to be asking every time we look at a new associateship opportunity. So how much do I want to make, and what kind of schedule, what kind of environment, and ultimately what kind of dentistry do I need to be able to do to achieve that. I think that early on in the career, associates need to be seeking high income opportunities, because I'm going to make this kind of pretty heavy statement here. The vast majority of dentists, I do not believe the vast majority of dentists will achieve their money and schedule and environment goals working in a regular associateship. I think the vast majority of dentists will have a much better shot of achieving those goals when they control the practice. In other words, when they own it. And so if ownership is part of this journey to achieve the life we want, then we need to get ourselves ready to be an owner. And part of getting ready to be an owner is making enough money and saving enough money so that the bank will give us a loan to be an owner. We got to make enough money and save enough money so we're a qualified dentist to own a practice in the bank size. So I think that young dentists early on especially need to seek out high income associateship opportunities that are going to then, in a way, buy them the next opportunity of owning what will eventually become the practice that allows them to achieve their goals. How do we know if an associateship opportunity is a high income opportunity? How can we even predict that? Well, the kind of lowest risk way of going into an associateship, hoping that it's a high income opportunity, is replacing an existing dentist that was already at that practice, right? When you're coming in because someone else left, you can look at that someone else's schedule. You can look at their production. You can look at kind of what they did and judge that based on what you think you would do as well. In other words, the patient base is already there and the history of productivity is already visible. You can see what you're stepping into. That's a lot more predictable than a practice that's growing and they're hiring an additional dentist, and that's you, the additional one. You're not replacing an existing dentist, you're being added. Well, now you don't know if you're going to have enough patients and what you would produce on those patients. Now, yes, you can and you should look at what the other existing doctors are doing in there. How much are they producing per day? And how many patients are they seeing? And you can come up with some kind of guess on what you might do in that practice with some common sense, but it's a lot less predictable because you don't really know, is the practice going to give you the same amount of patients or the same type of patients that the existing doctors are already getting? Probably not. The existing doctors are probably completely full. That's why you're being added, to relieve them of that. And now you're all going to have to split that patient base when you're at it. So it's more predictable if you go in and you replace the dentist. Also, when you're comparing associateships, not only do you need to look at what the doctors currently produce, you need to also look at things like the fees. There could be a big difference in fees. You could have one practice that's fee for service or almost fee for service, and their fees are a lot higher than practices that are in network or even take Medicaid, right? So you want to look at fees. You want to look at existing doctors and the history of production. You want to be able to look at and try to estimate your patient flow and how many of those patients are you going to be seeing at every single associateship you are applying for or considering. You need to create almost a simple chart that compares them all apples to apples to give you a sense of what is the right opportunity that's going to give you predictably a high income. Are you going to be allowed to do Invisalign or not? What is your compensation structure? Those are all things that you need to start looking at. And I believe that most young dentists should, as their primary deciding factor, look at income potential early on in their career, because I believe that young dentists need to save very high levels of their income. In other words, when you graduate, you become a dentist, you get your associateship, you don't go buy the BMW. You don't go get the house, the home loan. You don't dramatically upgrade your lifestyle yet. What you need to do is save. Build up a pile of cash personally, because that pile of cash is going to do several things for you. It's going to Number one, gets you approved to buy or start practices in a much healthier way at a much bigger number than if you didn't have that. Number two, it's going to give you the ability to invest in opportunities of growth. Maybe you buy a practice and you've got the opportunity to grow it even more. You buy this piece of equipment or hire that employee. If you've got a layer of cash to protect you, to responsibly protect you from risk, it allows you to take risk. It allows you to push growth further. And of course, you also don't know what life is going to dish out. You might find yourself like me with a broken back, suddenly $1 million in debt, not being able to be a dentist. You're going to need some savings to help you buy the time you need to then transition to the next phase of success. So young dentists need to passionately save the highest levels of income they can. Let's make as much as we can and save as much of that as possible. Let's put off committing to a home purchase. Let's put off the big expenses as long as we reasonably can. Let's let this chapter be about high income, high savings. Now, in that chapter as well, we need to invest in ourselves. So if we intend on having the income we want 5 years from now, the schedule we want, in the environment we want, doing the dentistry we need to do, we're going to need to learn how to be that person. We're going to need to learn clinically how to do that kind of dentistry. And we're going to need to learn from a business perspective how to become that successful. So while we are in the highest income associateship we can find, saving as much money as we can, we do need to invest in quality clinical education and quality business education. And this kind of education is life-changing education. It's a little dramatic to say, but it's true. So clinical education, I would prefer that a young dentist is learning clinically how to add additional procedures to their menu, add additional billable procedures. So I'd rather have them learn how to do sleep apnea therapy on adults or on kids as an added procedure to their menu than taking a class to do more advanced cosmetic dentistry right now instead of the normal cosmetic dentistry they do, or taking a bonding agent class or occlusion class. I want them to quickly add more diagnosable and billable procedures than try to become early masters of something they already know how to do. Because those additional procedures are going to, number one, give them a much larger base of dentistry to put in their schedule. Number two, it's going to give them the ability to experience a lot of different types of procedures, and it may lead them down a path they didn't expect. A path of, sleep-based dentistry or holistic dentistry or cosmetic or surgical. We need that exposure early in our career. And it also gives us a lot of value in being able to better treat a patient from a complete standpoint. When we've dabbled in a lot of different types of procedures, we start to diagnose more comprehensively for that patient. So I think it's a very good strategy early on. Let's not try to master something we already know how to do. Early on, let's try to learn how to do new things. And then from a business education standpoint, of course, that's something I do. I train people from a business standpoint. There's others as well. I believe that the earlier you can take business training in your career, the better. Take it way before you think you need it. Because when you learn what you don't know now, it will change the way you see your path moving forward. And it is interesting to me, like when you look at dentists, how we underestimate how much we don't know. We're like, well, I kind of know about startups. I've researched a little on this, or I know what I should spend on staff costs if I'm in a practice. We kind of tell ourselves, well, we know a little bit about it. How much really is there more to learn? It's amazing how often we underestimate that. So the earlier you can just say, I'm going to dive in heavy and learning as much as I can on the business side, the smarter you're going to be about your career decisions and the faster you're going to get to your goals. So high income associateship, high savings, invest in clinical training to add procedures, and invest in advanced business training. And then what you're probably going to find is that in order for you to accomplish those income and schedule goals, usually you're going to need to own the practice. Not always, but usually you're going to need to own the practice. So now you go into the ownership mindset. But here's another mistake I think some dentists make. When they decide, you know what, I'm ready, I think I'm ready to own. Well, usually when it feels like you're ready, you're almost late. So the right time to do something is when you realize it's the right thing long term, but you may not feel completely ready for it. And that's okay. The reason why you don't feel ready is because half of the learning it takes happens after you start the journey. Half of learning to ride a bike is after you get on the bike and start pedaling. You can't wait to feel comfortable knowing how to do it before you try it. Half of learning what it takes to run the company is after you own it and you start running. So you don't feel completely comfortable. It feels almost like a risk, or you're not sure if you're ready. Yeah, you're probably ready. The minute you say it is the right thing to do, although I don't know if I'm ready, then you're ready. But the problem is a lot of these dentists that, when they finally decide they're ready, what they're looking for is the perfect practice on a silver platter. They're looking for the perfect startup location that they feel represents where they want to live and where they want to send their kids to school, and they don't think there's any risk there. Or they're looking for the perfect practice to buy that just seems so easy and to buy and to run, and they're going to be successful. And rarely do the ideals exist. To have an ideal, almost always you have to make it ideal. So early on in your career, when it's going to be the moment you're going to become an owner, don't require an ideal situation. Be an owner and transition it to ideal over the course of your career. Now, I'm not saying go buy a piece of shit, but what I'm also saying is what you're going to buy or what you're going to start is not going to feel like the perfect practice. It's not going to feel like the perfect timing, the perfect location. And it's not realistic to think you'll find that. See, you have to make it that. So if the practice isn't beautiful, it's okay. You can make it beautiful. If the practice isn't as productive as you want yours to be, that's okay. You'll make it productive. If the practice doesn't have the kind of patient base that you ideally want, that's okay. You can transition the practice to have the patient base you want. And by the way, you can always sell a practice and buy a different one or start a different one as well. So I'd encourage you to kind of think about the first practice you buy as kind of like a starter home. It's not your perfect mansion, but over the course of your life, you're going to be able to have the home and make a home you want. This is going to be where you start. And you're going to start because this is going to be the part of your career where you learn to be an owner. And for most of us, we're going to probably own that practice for the rest of our career because we can make a practice what we want it to be. Some of us, we're going to sell that practice because life is going to change or because we desire to have something else. And that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with selling a practice. Just like you're not going to live in your starter home for the rest of your life either. Maybe you may sell it and that's okay. Right? But let's not be an associate for half our career if the associateship is not getting us the money goal, the schedule goal, the environment goal. We probably have to be an owner. So as early as we can, let's go be an owner, and it's probably not going to be ideal, and that's okay. Leading up to that, remember, we're going to have a high income associateship and save as much as we can. We're going to invest in learning new procedures, and we're investing in high quality business training. When you take that savings, when you take your new procedures and when you take your business training and apply it to your first practice that you own, probably you're going to dramatically improve that practice from a profitability standpoint, even from a clinical standpoint, from a culture standpoint. You are probably going to improve that practice. That practice was someone else's thing that kind of fizzled out and they were ready to sell it. And with their old way of doing everything and their kind of sometimes lazy way of doing everything. And this is now going to be you driven with a fire, with excitement, young in your career, with modern ideas and skills, focused on making this a wonderful thing. And you're going to grow this practice. Right? Now, there's some things I would be ruthless about as a young dentist. And it's hard to be ruthless about certain things as a young dentist, but I would, number one, protect my time boundaries in my life as a young dentist. So this is maybe a new topic right now. I wouldn't sign on to an associateship that was forcing me to work a schedule that was going to damage my life. Sometimes, working until 8 p.m. isn't going to damage our life. We're not married. We don't have kids. We're fine working like that. It's a great opportunity. It's not going to damage our life. But sometimes it is going to damage it. It's going to compromise things that are more important than a career. It's going to compromise my relationship with my spouse. My relationship with my spouse is way more important. A job. It's going to compromise my health. It's going to compromise my ability to be a good parent, right? So I would be ruthless about that. I would say, I've got time boundaries and I will not accept a position or be forced to do a schedule that is in conflict with those time boundaries. The earlier in your career you can make that final decision about protecting those boundaries, I think the more problems that you will ultimately skip over that a lot of dentists struggle with. We hear of dentists that they get unhealthy or they get unhappy or the whole suicide thing with dentists or, divorces and all that kind of stuff. A lot of times those things have this commonality that the career ate away important pieces of the life. And I would, as early as possible, not let that happen. Also, I would be ruthless about building and protecting my savings as a young dentist. So I would automate the savings to be pulled out of my paycheck and put into the right place. And I would be ruthless about protecting it. No, spouse, we're not going to buy a house, even though we have all that money sitting in the bank. No, we need to protect that. I would be ruthless about it. I would also be ruthless about scheduling the life experiences I want to have. That's kind of a weird topic, but early on, when we start working as our, young dentist selves or as a young owner, we kind of start just putting all of our priority there and we don't go see the world like we always thought we would. We don't go experience things we want to experience. We don't go train for that marathon or go experience Bali or the Philippines for 3 weeks, or we don't go like sailing for a week on the coast of Italy. We don't go meet these new people and taste these new foods and see these new things, or we don't spend that month with our parent that we need to spend who's not doing well. And these are the things that actually build long-time happiness in life. At least I feel that way. And so I would try to live a life, even as a young dentist, where I will do those things. My career is not going to eat away my life experiences. My career is not going to eat away my time boundaries for my day-to-day life. And I'm not going to let my life eat away my savings. You see, if you can master those two things, you're probably ahead of almost everyone in dentistry. So let's try as a young dentist to be focused and thoughtful and responsible about those things would be my advice. Now, a new topic here. I have written down here some notes as I've thought through all of this. And I put on here, bet on yourself early before it's comfortable. Bet on yourself early before it's comfortable. What does that mean? Bet on yourself. Being an associate for a decade, you might view that as not betting on yourself. You're working someone else's practice, someone else's team that they picked, someone else's software they chose, someone else's patient base they own, they control in their facility with a schedule they're telling you have to work. And when you work, you get paid 1/3 of what you do, but you don't get paid any of the hygiene that's possible because of you, any of the referrals that's possible because of you, or any of the other profit associated with your own dentistry. In other words, you are getting a salary and you are making the owner all the extra money in their environment that they control. And betting on yourself to me means you go be the owner. You go Bet on yourself to produce, to run, to lead, to capture all the profits, all the benefits associated with your hours, with your hands, with your dentistry, with your skill. Your relationship with the patient should result in your success and your profit only. That's betting on yourself. Betting on yourself before it's comfortable means you don't know if now is the right time. It's what I said earlier. It's not going to feel comfortable to bet on yourself at the right time. The right time is before you know how to do it. That never feels comfortable. It's this, you got to have this uncomfortable confidence. You're not betting that the next decision you're making is the right decision. You're not betting that the next thing you're going to try is going to work. What you're betting on is that you will navigate the good and bad decisions, the things that work and don't work, that you will end up reaching the goal at the end of this journey. Betting on yourself means you're going to take the journey and make it to the end. It is not that you're going to do it without conflict or mistakes or compromise. But I think too many of us think that like, okay, I want to avoid the mistake. No, don't avoid the mistake. Because the only way to avoid the mistake is to avoid the entire journey. And then you're just left with mediocrity for your career. So we need to take the journey, and we need to know a mistake's going to happen. We need to know something unexpected is going to happen. We also need to know we're going to get all this value. And at the end of this journey, we now control our life. Bet on yourself early before it feels comfortable. That could be owning. Or that could be betting on, like if you already own right now, it could be expanding before you know if it's the right, perfect thing to do. It's expanding. Or maybe it's if you own a practice today, betting on yourself early means focus on just the dentistry you want to do. Yeah, already. Even though you've been doing everything and you don't know if you're quite ready to just focus on what you love, focus on what you love. Or maybe it means, betting on yourself means, go right to the ideal schedule you want now for your life. 9 to 2. Right now. I know you're working 8 to 5, 3.5 days or 4 days a week, whatever it is. Let's just go 9 to 2 right now. And all the changes that have to happen, you're going to bet on yourself to navigate that journey so you end up with that schedule and you end up successful. Or drop the insurances, right? That's also betting on yourself. It's that you are going to be successful getting to the end of the journey. It doesn't mean the journey is going to be easy every single moment. It just means you bet that you will be able to navigate all of these kind of little riddles that have to be solved along the journey so you'll make it to the end. Now, okay, so let's go back to associateships and the young dentists. I think associateships must give you high income. And if you're already in an associateship and it's not giving you high income, I think you need to leave. I think you need to leave and go try another associateship. If you're in an associateship right now and gives you mediocre income, you might as well try another associateship. You know, you'll either have mediocre income or high income because the mediocre income is probably because of you are bringing at least a level of income that's mediocre, right? Almost no matter where, it's almost any practice you could go to, you're going to be able to make a certain amount. I'd hate for you to already be in a practice that's only giving you that much. Go try other practices to see if you can do better, if you can make more, if you're not making enough now. Also, you have to have enough time off for training. You have to book it. You have to pay for it. It has to be planned. You have to be able to get this business and clinical training. And then once you get the clinical training, ideally in your associateship, you're able to start doing those types of things. So, if I was interviewing for associateships, my 4 associateships I'm interviewing for, I'm going to compare them all based, apples to apples, what I think I'll be able to do. And one thing I would say is I intend to invest a lot in clinical CE to expand the procedures I can do. And I want to be able to do those procedures after I learn how to do them properly in my associateship. So what types of procedures do you not want someone to do in your practice? That'd be a question I'd ask. And that might guide me into what I learn or may guide me away from that practice altogether. Now, let's say you're in the associateship. You should be tracking yourself. I don't know if anyone's thought of this, but when I look at the associates that I've employed or all of my clients who have associates right now, one big struggle with the owner of the practice and with the associate is how do we get associates to be more productive? How do we get them to be more successful? And there are, 4, I think, key numbers that help us quantify success. There's also parts of success that aren't quantifiable. Like, do we have a good working relationship with staff, for example? It's hard to quantify that, right? But let's talk about the quantifiable ones. The first number that I would love for you to know what the other dentists do in your associateship, and specifically what you do every week, what you do every month, is what % of the exams that you do result in a diagnosis. So if you see 100 exams, or you do 100 exams, 100 patients, how many of those patients need dentistry or would benefit from dentistry or preventatively would benefit or cosmetically would benefit, right? Like out of 100 exams that you do, how many of those exams would the patient benefit from some dentistry? And then what's actually happening in your hands, in your practice, in your associateship? What is your percentage? What should it be and what is it? I would focus on that number weekly, at least, because that will keep you more honest in being a full diagnostician. In other words, even when you're getting tired or you're running behind or you're distracted or you're in a bad mood, if you know that you're measuring yourself on that number, you'll walk into the next exam as good as you can, knowing that it's your job to fully diagnose everything that would benefit the patient. So that's one number I would track. It's very important to have that number be healthy. If you're not good at diagnosing dentistry to begin with, everything else after that is going to be depressed. And the patient is not benefiting. So we got to be able to diagnose dentistry, and let's quantify it. Let's measure ourselves on it. Software measures it for us. Next thing I would measure is, okay, we diagnosed dentistry, but this next number is, what's the average size of a treatment plan that we diagnose? Are we a dentist that on average diagnoses $500 treatment plans or $5,000 treatment plans or $20,000 treatment plans? And it's important to have that number as well, because if we intend to achieve our time and schedule goal 5 years from now, we need to make sure that the types of dentistry we do and we treatment plan is in alignment with that. And so if we're a dentist that is treatment planning $500 treatment plan, it's going to be really hard maybe to achieve our goals. And maybe we need to learn how to start doing higher dollar dentistry. We need to go take clinical CE to learn those other cases so that that average goes up and we can be a dentist that has special skill and therefore gets special success and has kind of these higher dollar amount treatment plans. So that's the second number I track. What is the average size of treatment plan? First number is, what % of exams result in a diagnosis? The next number is, what % of the dollars that you diagnose are actually accepted? If you go diagnose $100,000 and 20,000 of it was scheduled, that means your dollar case acceptance is only 20%. What is your dollar case acceptance? How does it compare to national average, and how does it compare to top performers? If you see that that number is not a top performer, that might lead you to, at the minimum, be focused on having great communication. But on the maximum, I would hope would get you to start getting training on how to achieve top performing case acceptance. The right words, the right explanation, story, the right technology, the right steps. There's a recipe, a series of recipes to have a higher case acceptance percentage. You got to know what yours is. Every single week, you need to know. So that's the third number. The last number is production per hour. But I want you to compare your production per hour to top performers. And I also want you to compare your production per hour to your desired income. So take your desired income and calculate what would you need to produce down to the hour in order to achieve your desired yearly income. You're going to get a number when you do that math. I'm just going to make something up, $1,000 an hour. I'm just making it up. And now start tracking your production per hour. And if you see that you're at $300 an hour, that's a long way away from 1,000. That is going to get you aware of the gap and probably ignite more focus in you in your diagnosis and in your case acceptance. It might ignite more focus in you in being able to do more per visit or more in a day, to learn bigger procedures. It is going to get you to start changing the things that impact that number. If you don't track the number, you may not have the focus to change. You may just become someone that blames life on your problems, blames a treatment coordinator and an assistant, blames the patient, blames the practice, and blames the fees. But what's so interesting is when you take top performing dentists and you put them in the same practice that maybe we're talking about right now, the practice you blame, it's amazing how much better the top performing dentist does in that environment than maybe you do in that environment. It's not about the environment necessarily. It's about you taking the responsibility of success. It's helpful to measure yourself to know, is there a gap, so that you can be focused on closing it. You see, outside of these 4 numbers, a lot of other things are distractions. But if we master diagnosis, treatment plan size, we master case acceptance, we master production per hour, we have become incredibly successful. And everything else, again, can be a distraction from that. So us wishing our assistants seated patients a little bit earlier, or could make a better scan of a prep, or whatever it might be, those are also, things we want. But if those things result in us looking away from ourselves to improve, then that thing just became a distraction and prevented us from becoming the next version we need to become. So I want you to track these numbers as an associate. Ideally, you're looking at the associateships that you're applying for, and you're getting these numbers for their existing dentists, because that might also give you a clue into what's normal in that practice environment, what's normal of that team, what's normal of that patient base. And it may make it very easy for you to pick the right associateship. How do dentists pick associateships today? What, the biggest sign-on bonus? The biggest commission percentage? The prettiest office? Or some DSO brand? I don't think those are things you should use to pick your associateship. I think you need to look at income potential and, of course, your scheduling boundaries and so forth. And you need to look at how the dentists do, quantify how they do, the numbers behind how they do, so that you can understand in that practice, in that environment, with their numbers, with their fee schedule, what could you expect to do there? And then pick it. Now, another layer I want to kind of bring up here in this episode, and let me check on the timer. I feel like I've been saying a lot. Yeah, we're doing good on time. Another thing I want to bring up here is something that I think nearly every associate doesn't know they got to do. But it's in your best interest to, even though you're an associate, not an owner, you need to build a marketable personal brand now. That means you need to have a website now that has been thoughtfully designed with the proper color scheme and the font, the proper content, the proper photo, the proper video. It is a site about you. This is your professional website about you, the dentist. You need to have a social media following now on the different platforms. You need to have online reviews now, which means you're going to have a business page, Google business page, for example, now. You need to spend your associateship years as a young dentist building out the content, building out the search engine ranking, the followers, the online reviews, building all of that out now. That is your professional brand that you own, that you get to point at any address you work at, that will bring you additional success. And as the content piles up and the followers get bigger, the reviews go higher, ultimately it becomes a very valuable thing for you once you maybe own your own practice. All of that should be done now. And there's a way to do it now. There's a way to have a website. There's a way to get online reviews now, even though you're an associate. There's a way to do those things, but you need to do those things now. Well, let's step back and ask, what happens if you do what I said? So we're young dentists. We know we have this vision 5 years from now. We need to be on a path today that leads us to $500,000 take home pay. That leads us to a part-time schedule so that I can have a full-time life, right? It leads us to an environment that I can sustain. And ultimately, I need to be able to do this kinds of dentistry to support that, right? So we know that vision. And now we're trying to look for an associateship. And we know in order to get that vision, we're going to probably need to be an owner. And to be an owner, we're probably going to need to have decent savings. We're going to need that layer of protection. So I want to find an associateship that's going to give me high income. It's going to allow me to take time to get clinical and business CE. It's going to allow me to do the procedures that I learned how to do. And it is going to not break the boundaries of my lifetime so I can have the life experiences I want to have. I can build the relationships I want to build early on as a young dentist. And so I'm going to look at the associateships available. I'm going to start comparing them on these things. I'm going to ask for certain metrics of the existing dentists. How many patients do this? How many exams do they do? What do they produce per hour, per day, or per month? I want to know percent diagnosis, percent dollars accepted, average treatment plan size, production per hour. I want to be able to chart this all out, look at the fees, look at the insurance participation, look at my potential schedule, and now use my own intelligence, not artificial intelligence, but my own life intelligence to really quantify what's the best associateship for me to take. And then I take that associateship. And my life strategy here is I am going to have high income with high savings that I'm going to ruthlessly protect. I am also going to maximize my business training, maximize my clinical training to learn new procedures. And I'm going to build my personal brand and my following over that time. As I'm a dentist, I'm going to track myself on the 4 key metrics: the diagnosis, case acceptance, treatment plan size, and production per hour. And when I feel and see the gap of where I am compared to where I should be, that's going to launch me into learning the next thing, to achieving the next thing. I am going to be on a path of growth, of learning, of investing in myself. And before it feels like the perfect time, but after I know I need to do it, I'm going to invest in myself, and I'm probably going to end up owning a practice. And when I own that practice, I'm going to have the savings. I'm going to have these clinical skills. I'm going to have this business skill. I'm going to have this drive. I'm going to be tracking myself. I'm going to have the brand, and I'm going to go in and do way better than anyone else did in that situation. And ruthlessly, again, protect my time boundaries. I'm going to make sure I get my life experiences. I'm going to live a healthy balance of career time and lifetime and focus right from the beginning. And I will become successful with those boundaries. I think that's what the young dentist should do. It saddens me that we don't, as a profession, give back to the young dentists to teach the recipes for these things. It saddens me that we get in Facebook groups and just kind of fist bump emoji each other in things that aren't good. You know, like expansion just for expansion's sake, overworking, doing things out of greed. Like, it just saddens me that how we've defined success in dentistry, to me, is wrong. We've defined success in dentistry either as this big, wild number of lots of locations, lots of production, lots of profit, or we've defined success in dentistry in this short-sighted view that all that matters is the quality of our clinical care. I think really success in dentistry should be defined by we've expanded and achieved enough financially that we have space, protection, and freedom. But we've also protected our lifetime, our schedule, so that even though we're successful in dentistry, we're also very successful in being a good person and in having life experiences. And the people connected to us in dentistry have a great working environment. Patients have great clinical quality. The people connected to us in life can lean on us when needed, can be supported by us. We're present for them. That, to me, is success. And I'm sad that that isn't what we communicate to the young dentists, which is how we get young dentists thinking they need to spend 100 grand on occlusal continuums only to be unhappy and unsuccessful, or young dentists that just go wild and crazy and trying to, build some monstrosity of an organization with a couple dozen locations only to lose their health, lose their relationships, burn out, and, go bankrupt. I wish we could redefine what success actually is for the young dentists and let that be the norm. Let that be the foundation of what we believe as a dental society. And then let them go, jump from there to what makes sense for them. That's what I wish. And that's what I hope in some ways this podcast episode has done. All right. So that is my take on, at least for now, on what a young dentist should do. I know that I've probably said a bunch of stuff that other people disagree with. And, there's no right or wrong. It's just these words are coming from my experiences, and my experiences, skews my opinion, right? And I've had pains other people haven't, and they've had pains I haven't had. And this is just, I hope, one voice in your head that's trying to influence what you do. But I think, that this would be an amazing path to master, to own, to just dive all the way in with what I said right here. I would imagine you would have life and dental success at a higher level than most of the advice given to a young dentist. That's what I think. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap this up. I hope this was interesting. I appreciate you guys listening to our episodes. My name is Scott Leune, and this was the episode on what should the young dentist think about and do. I passionately believe in the words I just gave to you, and I will see you next time on the Dental CEO Podcast.
Resonate.